Hello, everyone. This is Jabrag name again with more from the Old Testament, from the part of Genesis that's called Vaira. Uh, it's chapters 19 to 24 this week. So we're in the middle of it, and I've been talking about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and I was planning to do the binding of Isaac story today, but I decided that there are so many thoughts in my mind about Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot and the contrast between Lot and Abraham that I want to talk about before moving on to Isaac, to the binding of Isaac. Now, one of the first thoughts that I had was triggered by a post I read on Facebook this morning on one of the Come Follow Me websites. And basically, I talked about the stories in if Abraham and Lot. So in the beginning of the story of Abraham, we see him sitting at the door of his tent, and and I spoke about the culture behind that and stranger culture and how we need to honor the stranger and how in their times they had the sacred need to honor the stranger. So Abraham is shown in that position. And the contrast with the story of Lot is Lot, as I said in the previous segment, is sitting at the gate of the city with the dignitaries transacting business, maybe involved in some festival. We don't know, but he's sitting at the gate, and that's how the story starts. And I think that emphasizing that in the beginning of Lot's story, the encounter between Lot and the two angels, was sort of meant as a contrast. So I'm grateful for the poster on Facebook about that, because it made me think about it and go back and think more about the contrast between the two positions. And the other thing I thought about when reflecting on the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah is how when people's hearts get hardened, how when they are invested, so to speak, in a certain reality, invested in their lives, in their material lives, they've become so hard to change. And I think that's another reason we have the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and the story of Lot in Genesis. It's to emphasize that. Remember, the whole Bible is a story about God always trying to restore order to earth, always trying to get people back to a holy state, or always trying to get us to where we can go back to Him, to a state of faithfulness. But the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, including Lot and his family, were not willing to let go. And one incident, and this thought was triggered while I was reading an old commentary on the Bible by Matthew Henry. And Matthew Henry brings up this point, and it's an excellent point, that remember, the angels are at the door, there is a struggle, the people out there are pushing to get in, and the angels just grab Lot and pull him in and shut the door and just close it. And then they strike the people with blindness. Now, the word used in Hebrew is asha. It's basically night blindness of some sort. It's not, I don't think it was permanent blindness, but they couldn't see at night is how it's described in Hebrew. So yeah, so I keep putting myself in the story and thinking, okay, I've just had this encounter. These people were trying to do whatever to them, either bring them out here to question them, or, as in some other stories, to rape them, whatever it was, that you were stricken with blindness, and you'd think, now I can believe. Now I believe that these are holy people, or there is something to this, and I need to stop the wickedness. But the people do not. And Lot's family, who witnessed this, Lot starts begging them to leave. The angels are asking them to leave, but the words, they look at it as a joke. They look at it as if this is some playful thing, or as if Lot has lost his mind. And Lot himself was literally pushed out of the city by the angel because of Abraham, in a way. So no punishment or miracle can change the minds of those who have already made up their mind. So that makes me think about teaching the gospel and arguing with people who don't believe testimony. It's fruitless. You cannot change anyone's mind. People change their minds when they have a good reason to, and when they have their own experience. Your own experience determines what you believe. That's something I strongly believe in, and in the story we see a historical sort of example of it. Now, the other thought that occurred to me today was triggered by a question I had. I woke up this morning and I was thinking, the Old Testament really is a great book. People, every 4 years we roll around and we start reading it, and encounter a question or a statement I always hear from people in every local ward I've been to in my life. Oh, it's Old Testament. We don't understand this stuff. Yes, culturally it's very different. We have some horrible stories in there, and it's not a happy book to read. But the scriptures are not supposed to be books that are either happy for us to read or understand even from a first reading. These books are books we experience. So, I posted something about it. The Old Testament is a book of hope. There is lots of stuff about social justice. There is lots of stuff about compassion, taking care of the poor, taking care of the orphan, taking care of the widow. It's a book that our culture, the culture of three religions, is based on. So, very, very important book. But then I had this discussion with my wife, and she brought up a good point. Why do we have all of these stories about the prophets, about people who should be holy? Why do we have all of these imperfections about them? Why do we have, for example, and still have to talk about it, Abraham and Hagar, Abraham expelling Hagar, and this is coming up in the next segment. But why do we have something like that in there? And I think it goes back to the Jews, the Hebrew scriptures. I think of any culture, nobody was more raw in describing their religious, spiritual, social life than the Jews. You have it all in there. And I think the whole point is that you see the prophets as humans. You see them as imperfect people having the same struggles, and having that knowledge and then seeing the results of their faith really helps our faith. It always shows us that there is hope, that we eventually can be perfected. We can find peace, that God will forgive us, that God will help us. And I think that is one point. But the bigger point, the more I thought about it through the day, the bigger point that I think is important, and I think it's poignant for our times today, is that we need to separate faith in the doctrine, faith in God's eternal plan, faith in all the things that are meaningful, faith in the gospel, we have to separate that from faith in an organization or a certain human. Um I hear it a lot. There are church leaders who can, at the local ward level or stake level or whatever, who can become stumbling blocks, who commit sins, who go to jail, who commit financial arsony. I mean, we've had in the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints apostles who've been excommunicated, who apostatized. And so the whole point of these characters being in scriptures is for us to learn that we ultimately have faith in God rather than in an organization or a set of people. It's very important to remember this, and I think that is one big reason why we have stories about prophets as and holy people being imperfect. Now, more thoughts about this. We'll talk about this some more in the story of Abimelech, which is also in the next segment. Now, here is the other point that Matthew Henry brings up in his excellent commentary, and it's available for free out there. I don't have a specific link to it. I get it through an app called eSword. But one thing we learned from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah also is we need to learn to try and see the good, even in the worst places. See the good in everything. And Abraham exemplifies that. Abraham is, when he's told that the angel's mission is to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, destroy cities of the plain, which again, he's being sort of consulted on that or being told about it, because remember, Abraham is promised that whole area. So he's sort of like the owner of the land, in a way. He's the steward, his posterity has been promised it, and that's why the angels are talking to him about it. They don't need his permission because the earth is the Lord's. He can do with it whatever he wants. But Abraham is the steward. It's been his promise, so he's being told about the destruction. But Abraham basically shows great hope and great empathy by pleading and saying maybe 50 people, if 50 are good, if 40 are good, if 30 are good. And he doesn't mention Lot too, because I think he kind of is doubtful about Lot. He doesn't know if Lot is righteous or not. Maybe this is my own speculation, but he doesn't mention him once in his pleading. But we need to learn to see the good in even the worst places and try to save that good. And because I think Abraham's point was that if there is even 10 good people in that city, they can turn the situation of the city around. I think that is great faith and hope right there. A story we'll talk about way later this year is the story of Jonah and Nineveh. And Jonah wasn't really a good prophet. He wasn't a perfect prophet. And of all the prophets, he was the most imperfect, the most human-like in his portrayal. But he goes into Nineveh and he says a short sentence. He says, repent because the Lord is destroying the city. And all of a sudden, everyone repents and they fast and pray, and the city is saved from destruction. And I don't think the account of Jonah and Nineveh is very short, and it doesn't provide the detail, but it's very parsimonious. But I think the situation turned around because a few people turned it around, not because the whole city. And remember, the king in this case might be that person. He decides to repent and everyone repents and the city is saved. So there is power in a few righteous people. And it goes along with what I said in the previous segment, that a situation in a society or a community doesn't turn bad unless the good people in that community don't speak up. and they don't come out speaking out and speaking up. And usually it is for justice, and usually being on the side of the person who is being oppressed. We have to always be on the side of right. And then another thing and the final thing I thought about is Lot. Now again, I harp a lot and Lot, but I can't help it. So he goes finally to the mountain as he was originally instructed, and there, and again, this is from Matthew Henry's commentary, which I really love. He said he allows himself to get drunk not once but twice, and in his drunkenness, the scriptures exonerate him because it says he didn't know, but he has intercourse with his two daughters. He commits incest and he has children by them. Now, again, not to judge because I wasn't there, none of us was there. One day we will know what really happened. But it shows us what happens when we sink in self-pity and we allow ourselves to sort of surrender, lose our alertness, lose our focus. The situation here is the world as he knows it has been destroyed. He's lost everything, and all of a sudden he's just wants to get drunk and forget about it. And I think that's something, it's a human tendency. Many of us can sink in despair after hard situations. I've had my share of those in life. But this is a lesson here to be learned, that we need to keep our focus. We need to keep an eternal perspective. We need to go back to the basics of our faith and learning in order to save a situation. If he looked across the plain, from his point of view, he would have seen that not the whole world was destroyed, because he was on the mountain. And I think the angels pointed him to go to the mountain for a reason. It wasn't just because the mountain is high or because he would be safe there necessarily, but because he probably would have a clearer vision. But he just goes into this narrow opening, this narrow cave, and with his two daughters, and I think he just gets drunk and doesn't go out to look and see what really happened. He doesn't take that perspective. So that all of these lessons. So as I looked at it today, I kept writing down. I thought I'd share them in their own segment. But the next segment will be about the binding of Isaac, the story of Isaac, and the story of Abraham in Abimelech's court. Two great stories. I anticipate that the binding of Isaac will take two segments because it's so rich in detail and lessons and cultural insights in the story. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you as usual for listening and being patient.